Okay, so you're going to want to go to the Inputs tab, and then you'll see these columns here is where you're going to enter the paints that you use. I pre-entered paints from 3 manufacturers: Sherwin-Williams, Benjamin Moore, and Behr. And just quick note, these prices here is retail pricing. If you're a contractor, you should absolutely be able to get better pricing. Just give Sherwin a call and ask them what pricing you could get. So you'll see this is really expensive, but you should be able to get a better price. Now the most important column is going to be this F column here, which is the coverage that the paint calls for. Now by law, the manufacturers need to release 2 data sheets on each paint that they make. One's a safety data sheet and the other is a TDS or PDS, a technical data sheet or a product data sheet. And you'll notice they all look very similar and are producing the same information, one of which is the coverage rates for that product. And you'll notice the coverage rates, like this one says a range 300 to 400, where this one says 350 to 400, this one says 250 to 350. And the reason there's a range is because it's very difficult to tell how much of a product you're going to need without having all of the inputs. One of the biggest is the actual substrate you're painting. So you can see this resilience is saying you can use it on aluminum, concrete block, stucco, wood, all kinds of stuff. And that is going to be the biggest variable that's going to affect coverage. There's a lot of other things like whether you're spraying, brushing and rolling, the temperature, the humidity, the pressure of your sprayer, the tip you're using. So many different things are going to affect the coverage rate that you get. Now, knowing this, the sheet is never going to be 100% accurate at predicting. There's just too many variables. However, I've found that the sheet usually overestimates a little bit, and that's by design, and you usually need about 70 up to 120% of what the estimate sheet will call for. And if you want to be as accurate as possible, you're going to want to put in the actual coverage rate that the paints call for. And I always put in the top coverage rate. So if we look at Emerald from Sherwin-Williams here, you'll see that it says 250 to 300 square foot per gallon. So you'll notice here under Emerald, I put 300 square foot per gallon. Now, knowing that sometimes you don't actually get that coverage, especially if it's on a very porous, rough, textured substrate that's going to soak it up like a sponge, I also repeat the paints. You don't have to do this, but I like to do this down here, and I just put the word masonry in front of it because most often something like stucco is one of those substrates where it's just going to take more paint. And I put the lower end of that range down here. And then when I'm taking my measurements, if I am going to estimate something like stucco, I'll use this instead of the higher range up here. Now again, you don't have to do that, but it's just trying to make it as accurate as possible, given the fact that it's really hard to do so with all the variables, because that variable is going to be your biggest variable is the substrate. Now, something that might be surprising to you and that you'll notice is not all paints are the same. You can see resilience is 400, where duration in Emerald is 300. Sherlastic, which is a specialty paint that's actually made for masonry material, it's made for concrete stucco, you'll notice it gets very poor coverage rates because, again, of that substrate and the nature of this product. So it's saying the high end here is 160 square foot per gallon. And you can read this to get a better understanding. I mean, you could even say if you're really trying to do a one coat system, 80 square foot per gallon. But the point is, if you were to have just treated it as a regular paint at 400 square foot per gallon, you might run into a situation where the sheet doesn't estimate enough paint. So long story short, I would come in here and enter any paints that you use. Feel free to delete these two to get rid of some clutter if you're never going to quote anybody on those paints. And let's say that you're at an estimate and they specifically request a paint that you normally don't bid. In the region I live in, there's some paints like Diamond Vogel. That would be a specific paint that we normally don't quote. What's nice about the sheet is you can just Google your local store, give them a call, say I'm so-and-so with such and such. I wanted to know how much does this paint cost. Then you could come into the estimate sheet, put the name of that paint, put how much it costs and the coverage for that. And now the estimate sheet will show you what it would cost for you to use that paint.